Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you all been staying cool out there this past week. I've had a little heat dome hanging around here and over North America, and been making things a little on the unbearable side, but take life as it comes, I guess. And here in my little attic studio, I guess it's probably about 31 degrees today while I'm recording this, and that's for people who are into Fahrenheit, that's about 86, 87. So I'm going to try to get through this before I start to melt. We're looking today again at the Old Testament and the story of Abraham sending one of his servants out to find a wife for his son Isaac. And Abraham sends him back to the part of northern Syria where he came from. Actually didn't want him marrying one of the women there in the land. And if you follow what happens in the rest of the biblical story, whenever Israelite men married women from the people there in the land, it did not go well. Anyway, his servant, he picks up and he goes and he comes to the place that Abraham has sent him to, and he decides to hang out at the well. And he has a specific prayer that he's going to pray, because this is, how do you, all these women, how do you find the right one? So, God, if you fulfill these particular things, then I'll know that the woman I'm talking to is the one you want to marry Isaac. And so I'm going to pick up later in the story. The servant is meeting with Rebekah's brother and father and recounting the story of what's just happened. So I'm looking at Genesis 24, be reading verses 34 to 67. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become wealthy. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male and female slaves, camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and he has given him all that he has. My master made me swear, saying, You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house, to my kindred, and get a wife for my son. And I said to my master, Perhaps the woman will not follow me. But he said, The Lord before whom I walk will send his angel with you and make your way successful. You shall get a wife for my son from my kindred, from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath. When you come to my kindred, even if they will not give her to you, you will be free from my oath. I came today to the spring and said, or to the well, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, if now you will only make successful the way I'm going. I'm standing here by the well. Let the young woman who comes out to draw, to whom I shall say, Please give me a little water from your jar to drink, and who will say to me, Drink, and I will draw for your camels also. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son. Before I had finished speaking in my heart, there was Rebekah coming out with her water jar on her shoulder, and she went down to the well and drew. And I said to her, Please let me drink. And she quickly let down her jar from her shoulder and said, Drink, I will also water your camels. So I drank, and she also watered the camels. Then I asked her, Whose daughter are you? And she said, The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him. So I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her arms. Then I bowed my head and worshipped the Lord and blessed the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who had led me by the right way to obtain the daughter of my master's kinsman for his son. Now then, If you will deal loyally and truly with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, so that I may turn either to the right hand or to the left." Then Laban and Bethuel answered, "The thing comes from the Lord. We cannot speak to you anything bad or good. Look, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken." When Abraham's servant heard these words, he bowed himself to the ground before the Lord, and the servant brought out jewelry of silver and of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. And he also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank, and they spent the night there. And when they rose in the morning, he said, "Send me back to my master." Her brother and her mother said, "Let the girl remain with us a while, at least 10 days. After that she may go." But he said to them, "Do not delay me, since the Lord has made my journey successful. Let me go, that I may go to my master." And they said, "We will call the girl and ask her." And they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" And she said, "I will." So they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse along with Abraham's servant and his men, and they blessed Rebekah and said to her, "May you, our sister, become thousands of myriads. May your offspring gain possession of the gates of their foes." Then Rebekah and her maids rose up, mounted the camels, and followed the man. Thus the servant took Rebekah and went his way. Now Isaac had come from Beer-lahai-roi and was settled in the Negev. Isaac went out into the evening to walk in the field, and looking up, he saw camels coming. And Rebekah looked up, and when she saw Isaac, she slipped quickly from the camel and said to the servant, "Who is the man over there walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "It is my master." So she took her veil and covered herself, and the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Thing interesting to note about Isaac there, the thing of going and walking in the field, it's in the Hebrew language, it's sort of like he's on a prayer walk there, so he's out praying. But anyway, this story of Abraham's servant going to find a wife for Abraham's son Isaac, and everything happening so according to plan, if I can say it that way, it just seems so right out of the movies, almost too good to be true. It starts with what appears to be the makings of a very old school arranged marriage that's not fair to anybody, especially the woman involved. Arranged marriages always leave you asking the Tina Turner question. You know that one, right? What's love got to do with it? But surprisingly, they give Rebekah the choice. Do you want to do this? And she says, "I will." And, it's a choice remarkably like the one Abraham made in responding to God's promise to him. She left her father's house to go to a land where she would become a great nation. And so she goes. If Abraham is called the father of faith, Rebekah, rather than Sarah, I think, should be called the mother of faith. Well, anyway, she arrives at the land where Isaac is, and smitten by Isaac, whom she's just laid eyes on, kind of love at first sight thing, she finds him there on a prayer walk in the field, and, I've got to doll myself up, she covers her face. Interesting here, I think, to note, this is the only place in the Bible that I'm aware of where a husband's love for his wife is actually noted. Isaac loved her. And, also their marriage is one of only a handful of marriages from these old stories. That's not complicated by other wives and concubines. It's monogamous. They love each other and are set on each other for the rest of their lives. Well, probably the most astonishing thing of all in this story, I think, is the role God has in bringing them together. Abraham sends his servant off on a fool's errand. Go find a wife for my son from among my people. These Canaanite women just ain't like us. The servant, loads up a small caravan of 10 or more camels and goes to roughly the area Abraham came from. And he goes to the local watering hole, not the bar, not the tavern. He goes to the well. That's where the local the local shepherds like to sit and watch the young women come to draw water from the well. There's just something about watching a woman draw water, apparently. Expecting that there will be women coming there to the well, he starts to pray, the servant does, and he basically tells God what to make happen to make it clear to him who is the right woman for Isaac. It will be the woman who gives him water and waters his camels too. As soon as he opens his eyes, there's Rebekah. She fills the bill. Gives him water, check. Waters the camels, check. Related to Abraham, check. It's a match made in heaven. Pray, faith, wait, God comes through. It does happen, I don't know if you've ever had your jaw dropped by God when you asked for a sign, a specific sign, and you got it. I have. It happens. Well, anyway, the idea that God can only play matchmaker and that a marriage can be lifelong and monogamous are ideas that challenge us these days. There are all kinds of views out there these days on love, marriage, and family. And just to pop off a few, there's the idea that we are not complete or whole without a significant love relationship in our lives. You may remember that iconic moment in the vintage 90s film Jerry Maguire, where Jerry, played by Tom Cruise, says to Dorothy, played by Renee Zellweger, "I love you. You complete me." Well, that one turned up all kinds of red flags in the world of relationship advisors who say, you need to be complete within yourself. You shouldn't need another person to complete you. Well, yeah. If you're saying that to somebody you just recently met, red flags should go flying all over the place. That's just your body pumping some feel-good hormones at you. Even in the long run, we cannot make another person responsible for making me feel complete. That's a huge burden for one person to bear. But there's the other side of that coin, We do need relationships, significant relationships with significant others in our lives to be complete people. If there is such a thing as completeness in this life, that would be the one I'd like to argue on. We are not independent, autonomous, rational, decision-making individual beings who can do and be what we want to do and be with no consequences to others. We are rather relational beings. Sure, there's some unique to me stuff floating around in us, but for the most part, I don't know who I am apart from the relationships, not just the love relationships, the relationships that I have and have had. And, some of those relationships are more foundational to who I am than others are. So that without those people in my life, I am very incomplete, and in some cases, freaking devastated. Parents die, children die, spouses die, best friends, these people who are important to us, they help complete who we are, form who we are. And when one of them gets out of the picture, it's devastating. Well, then there's the idea that there isn't just one person you'd make a good fit for. I don't know if you saw the movie Jumanji: The Next Level. Danny DeVito plays the grandfather to this guy named Eddie, and Eddie's had some trouble with the girl, and they're on the outs. And so Danny DeVito, he gives some advice to his grandson, whose name is Spencer, and he says, I couldn't find the quote exactly, but something like this. He says to his grandson, "Don't get too bent up over one girl. If I was your age, I'd just go ride the subway. There are all kinds of girls there to meet, and 1 in 5 of them I'd marry." When it comes to mates fit for us, there is more than one person with whom you could make it work. But still, one has to ask, is there that one person we are meant to be with? Depends on who you ask. I think that argument will be as old as human beings and as into the future as long as human beings last. And then there's what's vogue today in popular relationship psychology. Some will say monogamy and marriage are unrealistic expectations only meant to cause us shame and guilt. They say we're living longer these days and people change and grow, and you just can't expect long commitments out of people in that scenario. So grow as a person all you can with the person you're with now, and there's no shame in moving on to someone else who will help you grow even more into the person you're supposed to become. It only hurts you if you hold on to those unrealistic expectations like lifelong monogamous committed relationships. They also make the argument that evolutionarily speaking, we're not wired for monogamy. They might be right on that. We seem kind of polygamous when it comes down to that. It's better for the species, they say, if we have more than one partner. If you've got more kids by more than one partner, it increases diversity out there in the population, I guess. You farmers know more about this than I do in livestock. To that I say, in every culture that has endured, those evolutionary urges towards polygamy have always had to be curbed. Stable communities require relationships based in trust, and for some reason, the evolutionary urge to have more than one partner does a world of hurt in that trust department. And then there's the biblical perspective. Well, honestly, that perspective is all over the place. And you have to say that the role of Scripture at times is to show us that some things just don't work. Some things are just wrong. For lack of a better word, and I'll bring out that wrong word. And the Bible makes them look accepted and even right. Things like polygamy and having concubines and all that. Things like giving a slave to your husband as a wife to bear children for you because you're not able. These things are just flat wrong. Just because it's a seemingly accepted practice in the Bible, in Bible times, doesn't make it right. If you pay attention to how in the Bible, the biblical stories, the ones having multiple spouses play out, if you look at how they play out, you find it leads to a world of hurt in just about everybody. King Solomon, for example, he's probably the worst example of them all. He was the wisest and the richest of all of Israel's kings. But he had the habit of marrying to form alliances with other kings to try to prevent wars and stuff like that. He had over 700 wives who were princesses and 300 concubines. Nowhere is love mentioned in any of his relationships. These women were simply treaty trophies, if you'll allow me to call them that. There seems to be such total disregard there on his part that they were real women, real persons. They weren't property for a political exchange. And in the end, Solomon's marrying for political reasons led him to put shrines to other gods up in the temples so that his wives, and he along with them, could worship their own gods in the temple. And he did it with them. Polygamy damaged his relationship with God. We can only imagine the damage it did to the women. Polygamy, or polyamorous relationships as they're called today, only lead to idolatry and to shallow family relationships. If you need the evidence, well, as soon as Solomon died, his sons got kind of violent with each other and split the nation into two nations. The northern kingdom went as pagan as they could get. The southern kingdom went about as wealthy and obnoxious as you can get. Well, on the other extreme of marriage, the New Testament would seem to offer celibate singleness as the way to go. After all, that's what Jesus was, right? But with the advice, it comes with the advice that if you can't control your urges, it's better to marry than to burn with passion or to be untowards to another. But the singleness thing, I think for the most part, when you look at the New Testament, was the bias of the Apostle Paul, whose opinions were skewed by his own ability to be on his own and his own preference to live single. And probably more so by his very urgent expectation that Jesus would return at any moment. And that to him was more important than love, marriage, and pushing a baby carriage. That noted, there's nothing wrong with staying single. But I think if you look at the New Testament and you look at the whole of the Bible, when marriage and relationship comes up, it's monogamous. Monogamous and lifelong. That's the best way for humans to partner up. We also find, if you take a really good picture of it, that marriage should be rooted in love, a love that grows and blossoms to resemble the way that Jesus loves the church, and the church loves Jesus, which is unconditionally and selflessly, full of hospitality, generosity, patience, kindness, and forgiveness, serving, not demanding to be served. And if you want the ultimate definition of love, I think it's fidelity. It's not always about the feelings. It's like when the feelings aren't there, even you still be faithful to this person. The feelings always come back around. Well, turning back to our reading here about Isaac and Rebekah, there's a couple of things to notice. First, in God's plan for healing his very good creation from evil, sin, and death, through a people of faith, marriage and family play a central role in what God is doing. Genesis, the first book of the Bible, is the story of marriages and families who are trying to be faithful. It's not the stories of individuals solely trying to be faithful. It's not the story of individuals on a spiritual trip, It's about families, marriages. Even Jesus was born and raised within the context of the marriage and family of Mary and Joseph. Solid societies are built on solid families, not on individuals seeking self-fulfillment. When we start to break it down to individuals seeking self-fulfillment, things go haywire. Second, one could make the argument that yes, there is that one certain somebody that God would have us to be with. But we need to acknowledge that if God does indeed bring two people together, those two people need to keep God in the relationship. Acknowledge that the relationship is a gift from God, not to be taken for granted. And in times of trouble, we must always let God in the relationship take precedence over me, myself, and I. Of course, I'm rule out situations of abuse and things like that, but when it comes down to, I just don't feel it, we need to let God in the relationship. Find our base there rather than trying to just go out on the pursuit of what I want to be. God has a purpose for our marriages, for our families. And the best way to keep things healthy is to seek together that higher purpose for the marriage. Kind of at that point where I'm supposed to wind this one down. I'll just say the role of marriage and of family, it really seems to have fallen by the wayside in today's culture. And it is the byproduct of a resorting to me, myself, and I am the most important thing on the planet. If you can help me out with that, then we'll get along good. We are all about I, not about we. The breakdown of the family in our culture has its consequences. The primarily seeking the be all I can be, the me, myself, and I, has its consequences. The detriment of human community. We're meant to be in relationship. Not saying we're meant to be in love relationship. That's part of our relational world. We are relational beings. We find out who we are in our relationships. We become who we are in our relationships. And that one of, marriage and the family, those are important. They're a reason they're called nuclear. When they fall apart, it's like a nuclear explosion. So, honor marriage. Do everything you can to support your sons and daughters in their marriages. It's not just their business. Anyway, that's all I got. You folks have a good week. And I'm going to leave you with kind of a peppy song. It's called When the Spirit of the Lord Moves in My Soul. So have a good week, and God bless you. Amen. When the Spirit of the Lord moves in my soul, like David the shepherd I sing. When the Spirit of the Lord moves in my soul, like David the shepherd I sing. I sing, like David the the poet I praise.